This story was told to me by my friend Katie. Katie was on Craigslist looking for a new car. She heard a tapping on her window, but ignored it because it was supposed to rain later that night. She found a car she liked on Craigslist. I don't remember what kind, but it was going for $1,400, which for her was a good deal, and she replied saying that she was interested. The next day, she woke up and realized that the person who posted the ad responded, giving her his address. She replied with, "I'll be right over," and then heard another tap on her window again. Of course, she ignored it, not exactly sure what it could be, but more excited to get the car. She took her mother's car to the address to check it out. It was maybe an hour away, which didn't bother her, because she lived in the country at the time, and she loved seeing the scenery. But this is where it gets chilling and weird. When she got to the address, she looked over and saw a run-down house. She got out of the vehicle and was greeted right away by the supposed advertiser. He said, "The car's in the garage." He walked behind Katie and started to lightly nudge her towards the garage. She told me that at that point, alarms were going off, but she ignored them. He pushed a button that was in his hand that opened the garage. There she saw the car and just glanced over it. As she walked around the car, reviewing it in her mind, she was starting to feel relieved. It was in great condition, exactly how the pictures looked. As she approached the back of the car, she saw that the man was smiling more and more. Katie just assumed that he was happy that she was happy with the vehicle and ready to make a sale. But at the back of the car, on a table just behind it, there were a dozen different pictures, photographs laid out flat on the table's surface. Pictures of her through her window. As panic and chaos erupted inside of her, the man spoke. "She runs great. Got her a few months ago, but my buddy gave me his Jeep, so I don't need it anymore." Immediately, Katie didn't respond with words. Rather, she ran back to her mother's vehicle. This may have been what the tapping was, she thought. Someone outside taking pictures of her. As soon as she began moving, the man did as well. Luckily, she made it back to the car and locked the doors. Then she got out of there, called the cops, and drove home. By then, she was crying, a complete mess of herself. After this experience, I think what freaks her out the most was the fact that the man knew her plans to buy a car, knew her enough to know what she wanted, to make sure she would pick up the ad. How long had he been following her, and how close had he come?
Who is there?
We used to have this neighbor. His name was George. He was about 50 years old at the time. He lived alone, and I swear all he used to do was just stare out his window, giving us dirty looks. Whenever kids would knock on his door asking for their ball back, he would always curse at them and make a big fuss about it. Sometimes, he wouldn't even give the ball back until a week later, when he would just puncture the ball and it would be flat, and then he'll just throw him over the fence. He was a moody old guy. But every second weekend of the month, he would go fishing for 2 days. I was 15 at the time of this story, and one day myself and my friend, we came up with an idea to sneak into George's house. Because as dumb teenagers, we thought it would be hilarious. So that following weekend, George left for his weekend fishing trip. And that same night, me and my friend, who was sleeping at my house at the time, we snuck out late and went to check George's creepy house. I always knew he left a spare key under his plant pot, so getting inside was easy. I know this is breaking and entering, but what we discovered in the house made me thankful that my friend and I came up with this dumb idea. We looked around George's house. Most of the rooms were pretty normal as far as normal goes. My friend went off and looked around the other rooms while I went into his office. There was a computer there. I moved the mouse around and clicked on the login. Funny enough, he didn't even have a password. I looked around his PC desktop at what applications he had. Pretty basic stuff, but I noticed a file called Favorite Photos. I clicked on it and saw hundreds and hundreds of inappropriate pictures of children in our neighborhood. I was thinking to myself, what the hell is this? Just as I was looking at this sick stuff, I could hear my friend loudly whispering to me from another room, saying I need to look at something right now. I left the computer desk and went to have a look. My friend found a duffel bag with duct tape, sleeping pills, candy, a long piece of rope, crowbar, and a loaded gun. We were both in complete shock. I also told him, and I showed him what I found on his computer. We both were scared as hell, and it wasn't funny anymore. We put everything back the way we found it and snuck out back to my house. Me and my friend didn't know who to call, so we didn't really want to call the police because we would have gotten in trouble for breaking in. We chose not to say anything to anyone until this story.
I'm 16 years old and currently live next to a vacant house. Barely even a vacant house, more like abandoned. I never knew why the town never made an effort to fix it up and sell it. That never really bothered me though. Not until after a recent disturbing event. My bedroom faces the neighboring house in question, and sometimes on hot nights when I had the window open, I would feel like I could hear voices or moaning type noises coming from the neighboring house. One night, I was on my bed playing video games home alone when I muted the TV, thinking I heard something from outside. I went to my window and literally gasped when I heard a brief scream coming from inside the abandoned house. It wasn't drawn out at all, it only lasted about maybe a second, and I could just barely hear it. My adrenaline was rushing now, I wanted to get closer immediately. I shut off the lights and TV, took my airsoft gun as a mock weapon, and hopped the backyard fence over to the abandoned house's backyard. I knew the back door was left unlocked since I had been in there before with friends. I simply opened the back sliding door quietly and crept inside just a bit to listen for any more sounds. There was a weird, steady, creaking type noise. It was very low, but it was evident. It was also as dark as it could get in there. I flicked on the light attachment on my airsoft gun and aimed it in front of me, actually feeling pretty cool for a moment. I now stepped fully into the house, and the sound grew louder. I scanned the living room, completely empty, as were the other rooms on this floor. I crept over to the basement door, which was open. The sound was coming from down there. I felt my heart begin to race, and my gut instinct was telling me to turn around and leave now. But I guess my teen boy adrenaline and curiosity got the better of me. I took one step at a time down the stairway as the creaking sound got louder, and when the opening to the basement finally became visible, I aimed the gun light around the room. I froze when the light landed on something that was moving. It was a rocking chair. I got a serious pain in my stomach when I saw the back of somebody's head sitting in the rocking chair. When the light landed on them, the chair stopped rocking. I ran up the stairs, slammed the basement door shut, ran outside, slammed the back door shut, and locked my front and back door after getting back inside. I went to my room and stood at the window, watching the house. I then picked up the phone and called my dad. He seemed more surprised than concerned when I told him, confirming that nobody lives there. He calmly told me to get the police over there to check it out. When I hung up the phone, I looked out the window again, and right across from me, on the same level, there was somebody standing at the upstairs window of the abandoned house with the window open. I shut the blinds and called the police. They told me to keep watch through my window, and when I lifted the blinds back up, he was gone. I just hoped he was still in the house by the time the cops showed up. But of course, just my luck, the house was devoid of any people or furniture. Well, except for one thing, a single wooden rocking chair in the otherwise empty basement. Before I got an iPhone 10, I used to have an iPhone 7. I was perfectly fine with that phone and I never got a scratch on it. I'd probably still have that phone now if I didn't lose it. I always had the Find My iPhone feature enabled, however, just in case if I did lose it, I'd be able to track it. To this day, I still don't remember how or where I lost the phone. All I remember is I came home one day, quickly realized I didn't have my phone on me, and had a mini heart attack. I searched the whole house, my car, the pathway up to the house. I even drove back to all the locations I was in that night to look for it, but I couldn't find it anywhere. Then I remembered I could sign into my iCloud account for my laptop and track my iPhone using the Find My iPhone setting. So I drove home and did just that. Apparently my phone was coming up somewhere in the woods at the end of the village. None of my siblings were home at the time. They were all away at school, so I couldn't ask any of them to come with me. So it looked like I was heading out alone. My dad didn't want me to come because he had work early the next morning, but he let me take his phone with me to track my phone. It was a quick 5 to 10 minute drive to the woods. I parked on the grass on the side of the road. It seemed like I was maybe a minute walk north away. Obviously I brought my flashlight expecting to be following the trail into the woods. Now that I stood there though, the idea of going in there was a lot less appealing. In fact, the whole situation seemed more suspicious, such as why whoever found my phone would be in the middle of the dark woods at 10 o'clock. I definitely shouldn't have come alone, but at this point I didn't see much more of a choice than following the trail. The flashlight I had sucked. It barely lit up the trail 5 feet in front of me. Eventually it seemed like I was right on the mark of the location for my phone. I did a full 360, examining my surroundings, but seeing nothing but darkness and trees. I started yelling for somebody to come out. It was the first time I heard my own voice in an hour, and it came out weak and unintimidating. When I called out, I heard a whispering come from beyond a few trees, and the east direction on my map. I yelled out again. Silence this time now. I started sending texts with my dad's phone to my phone, and I heard the dings coming from the same direction as the whispering. I looked in that direction and saw the glow of a phone screen so bright that it lit up the figures of 2, maybe 3 men standing behind a line of trees. At that exact moment, I had a realization in my head that I was in way over my head being in those woods alone, and that my iPhone was in no way worth risking my life. I turned the flashlight off and ran back down the trail as fast as I could, back to my car. By the time I got back, my phone could no longer be located on the Find My iPhone app, meaning it was either broken, disconnected, or turned off. I have checked a few times since then if the phone comes up on the map. It never has though. I think I made the right choice running away. I don't think any possession would be worth approaching a group of people like that in the woods.
I was 13 when this happened. I was home alone and my parents had gone out to dinner. I was a very bored kid, so when my parents left me home alone, I would play my Xbox on the TV in the living room. It was a Friday, and I was playing a game on my Xbox when my phone rang. It was a number which I had never seen before. I paused the game, and out of curiosity, I answered the call. I said hello into the phone, but there was no answer. I hung up and continued my game, but the same number called back. I let it ring for a bit before answering it for the second time. I said hello again in a kind of annoyed voice, but there was still no response. I then said, "Listen to me, don't call this number again, buddy." I was about to hang up when I heard a man's voice on the other end say, "You should really keep your bedroom window closed." I thought it might have been a joke, so I told him, "I never leave my bedroom window open," and I hung up the phone. I took a break from my game and went to go charge my phone, but I remembered that I had left my charger in my room. I walked over to my room to go get it. I opened the door and found my charger on my nightstand and grabbed it. However, while I was in the room, I noticed something else. I felt a cool breeze in my room, and I know the AC wasn't on because I never turned it on. It was my window. My window was wide open. It then hit me. The phone call. I ran back to the living room and called 911. When the cops arrived, they investigated. There wasn't really much they could do though. They just said whoever it was surely gone. I called my parents and they came home and talked to the police. I still don't know what the guy's intentions were, but I really don't want to know. My name is Brian, and I was around the age of 14 when this happened. I lived in a very rural part of the outside of Nashville, so my house is basically in the middle of nowhere. One day, I was told that my parents would be going out into the city that night for their 25th anniversary for dinner. I was very excited that I would have the whole house to myself, and whenever my parents would go out, they would usually be gone for a long time, and I could really use the quiet. They left the house at around 7, and I just decided to play some video games and watch some TV and later maybe make some dinner. For the first couple of hours, everything went okay. I played a few video games, watched some TV, and mostly just kept to myself. At around 9:30, I was watching a scary movie, and it was getting to a good scene when I heard a knock at the door. I rolled my eyes and paused the movie, but I was also confused that someone would be knocking on our door this late in practically the middle of nowhere. I opened the door to see a man, I'd say in his 30s, dressed in a Pizza Hut uniform, holding a large pizza in his hands. He said, "Hey there, buddy, I got a large pepperoni pizza for the Sanders." I was confused as to why he was here and how he knew my family's last name, which is Sanders. I told him, hey, I didn't order any pizza." He said that someone from my address ordered it online. I asked him for his name, and he said it was Joseph. I said thanks and took the pizza from him, and he told me to have a nice night. As he was leaving, though, I noticed something very strange. I didn't see a car in our driveway, so I was wondering how he got here. I didn't pay too much attention, so I put the pizza down and called my mom to ask if she had placed the order. She said that she didn't order any pizza for me. Now I was kinda getting freaked out. I went out my front door trying to look for the delivery guy, but he was nowhere to be found. I then called Pizza Hut asking if they had delivered any pizza to my address. They told me to stay on the line while they checked, and they said, "Sorry, our records don't show that we delivered the pizza to your address." I told them thanks and hung up. I was very suspicious at this point and decided not to eat the pizza and that I would deal with it when my parents got home. I just went to my room and continued to play my games when I heard a slight knock on my window. I opened the blinds and saw the same pizza guy standing there with a wide smile. His eyes were crazy and wild, and he just stood there staring. I closed my blinds and immediately went to the kitchen to call police, and they said they would have a cop there in 15 minutes. I waited for what felt like hours until they finally came and took my statement. I gave them a description of the man, but they never found him, and I still have no idea as to what his intentions were. But I do know one thing. He was definitely not just planning on delivering me pizza. This story happened to my dad, and it kinda gave me chills when he told me this story. It was just before I was born, about 3 months. My mom and dad were on the couch watching TV when my dad got a phone call from an unknown number. My mom lowered the TV so my dad could talk to whoever was on the phone. After my dad said hello into the phone, the person on the other end said,
"I'm going to come in your home and slit your throat."
My dad just figured it was a prank and just said to the guy that he was calling the cops. But the guy on the other end just laughed and then said,
"I'll see you both soon."
My mom asked who that was, and my dad just said, just some pranksters. He forgot about the incident for a few hours when they both heard noises in the kitchen. My dad got worried and went to go see what it was. Before he was about to turn into the kitchen, he asked if anybody was there. And then, he heard footsteps run towards the back door. He tried to chase whoever it was, but he wasn't fast enough. My parents are both convinced that whoever was in the kitchen was the guy on the phone.